Today, I want to share with you an incredible story that happened to my close friend in my distant childhood. This is a story that I will never forget because it is full of unexpected turns and incredible coincidences. Are you ready to plunge into the world of adventure? Then fasten your seatbelts because we're going on a journey that will make you laugh, wonder, and maybe even a little jealous. You are ready? Go! Burned in embarrassment. Chapter 1. After my first semester of college, I really wanted to go home for the vacations. I went to school in Rochester, New York, and anyone who has experienced lake winters on the Great Lakes will understand my desire to go somewhere warmer. For me, that warm place was very far away. Growing up in the military, home was often a moving target, and that winter it was Santiago, Chile, where my father served and where I graduated from high school. It was summer in Santiago, and I was looking forward to vacation so I could go to a pool party with my old high school buddies. We didn't have much money, but as a Navy ROTC student, I was allowed to take a space trip on a military flight. I had to get to Charleston, South Carolina, and transfer to International Flight C-141, which was making a loop through Latin America. After getting to Virginia and then taking a very long bus ride up the coast, I finally made it to Charleston Air Force Base. After picking up my ROTC travel authorization, I checked in at the front desk and made sure I was on the waiting list for the flight leaving on the 23rd. I wouldn't get home until Christmas, but better late than never. With my pockets almost empty, a hotel room was out of the question, so I slept in the terminal and snacked on the cheapest food I could get. There was a festive mood in the terminal. So many people were rushing home for the holidays, and I took in that feeling, looking forward to the long flight, first to Panama, then to Lima, and finally to Santiago. After a seemingly endless wait, we were an hour away from landing when I was taken off the flight because of a group of Marines traveling to Panama on a mission order. I was devastated. The next flight left early on the morning of the 26th. At least this plane was huge and almost empty, so I was almost guaranteed to get on board. But what was I going to do for Christmas? Looking at the schedule of departing flights, I saw that it listed a flight to Tyndall Air Force Base, Panama City, Florida. "When does the flight to Tyndall leave?" I asked the pilot behind the counter. "An hour and a half from now, and it's almost empty. Would you like one?" he asked, offering some compensation for my last-minute hesitation. I lived in Panama City in 9th and 10th grade, and I still have close friends there, many of whom I still keep in touch with. Maybe I can find someone to spend Christmas with. It has to be better than sleeping in the terminal for 2 more days. "Please," I told him, "save my seat for Santiago. I'll be back for this flight." I remembered that Panama City has a fairly large Greyhound station, so I called Greyhound and checked to see if a bus could get me back in time for the flight. They had such a bus, and at 7:30 a.m. on Christmas morning, it was scheduled to get me back before midnight on Christmas Eve. I was perfectly capable of catching the flight the next morning, even if it was delayed a few hours. I bought the ticket using the Amex card my parents had given me when I left for college. I explained to my parents that I had paid $67. I called my family in Santiago and broke the news. The call was short because of the expense, so I let them know that I had been rescheduled, but I would be there on the 28th. I told them I was heading to Panama City and would take the bus back to catch my flight. My mom cried, and my dad told me to use a credit card, but try to keep my spending reasonable. By the time I hung up the phone, I was pretty depressed, but at least I had a plan. No sooner had I tried to contact someone in Panama City than the announcement sounded, and suddenly I found myself on my way to Florida for Christmas, with no lodging and virtually no money. I was feeling a little melancholy, but determined to do my best. So I was at Tyndall Air Force Base at 23:20 on December 23rd. I was contemplating who to contact first. I had several close friends nearby, and I expected all of them to be home for Christmas. After a brief internal debate, I settled on 2. I had always got on well with all their families and was still in regular contact with both of them. In the old days, Mike lived closest to me. He was from a large family with 6 siblings, including Peggy, who became one of my first real deep crushes. When I was in 9th grade, she was a high school senior, beautiful and sophisticated. My longing for her was unrequited, but I enjoyed thinking about seeing her again in 4 years. She was a senior in college and would probably be home. I knew they would welcome me, but I feared it would be awkward. They don't have a very big house, and it would probably be crowded, especially with 3 college kids visiting for the vacations. Besides, I didn't know if they had anyone else in mind. Tommy, on the other hand, came from a relatively well-to-do family that had always lived within its means. He had an older brother who worked in Japan and was hardly ever home, a sister, Shiri, who went to school a year later than we did, and 2 younger brothers who I guessed were about 9 and 10 years old now. They had a spacious house, each kid had their own room, and I wouldn't kick anyone out if I stayed there. I'd always had a crush on Shiri, but although I dated her best friend, I'd never gone out with her. Being able to see her again would be an added bonus. Feeling nervous and awkward, I dialed Tommy's number from memory and luckily got him on the first ring. If I'd gotten someone else, I would have felt really awkward. Tommy's answer was unmistakable. He had a funny way of saying hello when he picked up the phone, and the sound of his voice brought me back in time. He replied. Tommy, guess who? I asked. My voice must have been quite recognizable because he didn't hesitate for a second. Steve, oh, what are you up to? Where are you? He answered impatiently. That brought a smile to my face. It was nice to hear a happy, cheerful voice that seemed genuinely happy to hear me. Funny you should ask. It's a long story, but I'm in a bind. I'm in Tyndall, and I'm stuck here until Christmas, I told him. What happened to Chile and Rochester? He asked. I was flying home to Chile when I lost my seat on a plane in Charleston. I couldn't fly out until the 26th, so when I saw an empty plane heading that way, I just jumped on it and hoped for the best. Explained me. This is great, he almost shouted. It's not that you couldn't get home, it's that you're here. Do you want to stay with us? You can have Greg's room. He won't be here, and I'm sure Cherie and Mom would love to see you. We've been a little jumpy around here with Greg cancelling his trip home at the last minute. Your presence should cheer things up a bit. He sounded enthusiastic, and I couldn't help but grin back. Don't you think you should check it out? I laughed. A shout in my ear was my answer, and I heard half of the shouted conversation. Mama, guess who's here? No, not Greg. No, keep guessing. Guess again. All right, Steve. Yes, Steve Pelland. He's stuck in town until Christmas. Sure, I told him he had to come here. I'll follow him. I will. Yes, Mama. Yes, I will not. I will. I held the phone slightly away from my head and almost missed it when it came back on. Where do you want me to pick you up? He asked. The main terminal? You know where it is, don't you? Replied I. Sure, I'll be there in 30 minutes. Dude, that's great. I hung up the phone with a big smile on my face, feeling 100% better than I did just 10 minutes ago. I stood outside waiting for him, and after about 20 minutes, the Christmas lights went out one by one as the establishment closed for the night. It was dark and quiet, and I started to get nervous again, wondering if this was a good idea. I was 500 miles from home and completely at the mercy of old friends. But speaking of friends, I couldn't find any better than my own, and at least I wouldn't be sleeping in a lonely terminal in Charleston for 2 days, slowly eating my meager funds. When Bob pulled up around midnight, I saw that he had gotten rid of the VW bug his mother had given him when he turned 16 and was now driving his brother's old two-tone Cougar. We took a minute to say hello, load my stuff into the trunk, and then headed back into town, telling each other about the story. When I first moved to Santiago, I wrote to her about once every couple months and also called her a couple times a year. In the beginning, I wrote often to Sherry as well. She was one of the most prolific writers among my old friends and usually wrote to me twice for every letter I wrote. Over the years that turned into holiday cards and a surprise call once a year. I knew he was attending Florida State University, and Greg had graduated from Georgetown and went to Japan on business. That's it. Tommy told me about the old gang, about who was in town, who went to what schools, what people did. I told him a lot more details about what I was doing. So, he asked, is there a girl? Not right now. I thought I had one after the ROTC Christmas ball, but I guess that was my mistake. I admitted. It's hard to believe. You've always had someone. Every letter, every phone call. They don't seem to stay the same for that long. He teased. I don't. I've had a few relationships that lasted quite a while. 2 of them lasted more than 6 months. Objected I. Ooh, 6 months? He laughed. What about you? I asked defensively. Still Aaron. It's been almost 2 years, he asked. Shit. What does she see in you? She could do so much better, I teased. Really? How? Like me, I laughed. Right, like that's ever going to happen. Don't even think about it or you'll be sleeping on the street. He laughed too. Not if I call Aaron, I won't, I replied. I thought it was a great comeback, but I earned a sock in the hand. We pulled up to his house, which looked the same as before, and everything was pretty quiet. They used the same window lights year after year, the same roof lights, the same bushes. It was just as I remembered it. Who says you can't go back? Mom has to work tomorrow, so I'm sure she's already in bed. And Dave, as you know, goes to bed early, so we'd better keep it down. We've got a lot to do tomorrow as it is. We walked quietly into the house and put my bag in Greg's old room. Tommy stayed and chatted for a few minutes, then said goodnight, telling me I could sleep as long as it wasn't before 9 in the morning, and left me to get settled. After 9? Now I remembered that they were always early birds. For me, 9 a.m. was the dawn. Tommy and I had breakfast around 9:30. He was already chiding me for oversleeping and missing the whole family. We had the house to ourselves. He was on the phone making arrangements for our day, and after finishing our pancakes, we headed over to Mike and his family. The entrance to Mike's house was the same as before, only even bigger. There were people everywhere, noise, laughter, fussing, all of which Mrs. Frey took calmly. We spent a few hours visiting and ate to our heart's content. Mike's older sister Peggy still seemed nice to me, but no longer the marvelous creature that my memory had somehow preserved. I had to tease her about the Christmas present she had given me 3 years ago. She bought me a tape of Richard Pryor, thinking it was Bill Cosby. When I turned the tape on for her in the car, she exploded, calling me names and accusing me of nefarious intentions. At the time I felt bad, confused, angry, and had a host of other feelings, but now, thankfully, we can laugh about it. When I was 16 years old, I had some trepidation about her. Now everything was calm. Mike's older brother was home too, with his roommate, who looked terribly unwell and must have been at least 5 years older than Dan, maybe more. It was a story I had to learn more about. The biggest surprise was Alice. She was a few years younger than us. I wasn't sure if she was 16 or 17 by now, but she was the bomb. And she clung to me like a bandit. I was really nervous about her acting so touchy-feely when her mother and Peggy were around. I was suddenly glad I had decided to stay with Tommy. I'm afraid that with such a beautiful girl, who seemed so taken with me, I might have gotten into a lot more trouble than I needed to. When we got out of there, Mike joined us, and we went to see Jack and Russ. They had a 1-year age difference. Russ was in our class, and we were friends with him. But Jack, even though he was a year younger, was our buddy. We played on the basketball team together, and when Tommy and I formed our first band, Jack was our bass player. At the Chambers house, we indulged in memories again and relived our first performance. We had decided to perform in the school talent show. Tommy played piano, Jack played bass, and I played guitar. We had a fourth guy on drums that we lost touch with. We played Elton John, Deep Purple, the Eagles, and the Beatles. We opened the concert with the opening riff of the song Smoke on the Water, and it became a hit. We were pretty lousy, but the audience was made up of our friends, our parents, and our friends' parents. And at the end, our parents even raised money for us. Pretty cool stuff. We called ourselves Bronzemyth and had already designed the artwork for our first 3 albums before we did our first birthday concert. Jack had been tall then, and he was still tall. He was 170 centimeters tall, went to the University of Florida, and played basketball. He reminded me of the time we went on our first dates together. I went with Catherine Best, the most coveted girl in the entire school, who was in Jack's class a year later than me. Jack, on the other hand, went out with our Valentine's Day Queen Anne, who was in my class and was almost a full 2 years older than Jack. He was always very advanced. We had a third couple with us, Dennis and Suzanne, and Jack reported that Suzanne got knocked up just before I went overseas, and he and Dennis got married. There was a big scandal, but they stuck together and had a baby. They lived with Suzanne's parents. Dennis was doing well, working for Susanna's father. While we were visiting, a few friends stopped by, including the aforementioned Catherine, who lived across the street. Catherine, a stunning brunette with the body of a 20-year-old girl when she was 15. and a beautiful face with features that just amazed me. Catherine, the very first girl I got to third base with. She was just as beautiful as I remembered, and I learned that she was going to be going to Mount Holyoke the following year, which was an odd coincidence since my girlfriend from high school was a sophomore there. A date with Catherine, who was a year younger than me, turned out to be a total fiasco. We were sitting together on a bus ride out of town and had a seat high enough that we got the right seat, second from the back. In those days, trips like that were our biggest dates. Our school was a small parochial school, and on bus trips, athletes, cheerleaders, and student cheerleaders rode on the same bus. The 30 and 90-minute trips were like cheer rallies on the way out of school and on the way back to the back rows of movie theaters. We often had our hands checked and lights turned on as our coaches walked down the aisle, but it seemed like the checks became a little less frequent after our victories. Our win in Pensacola was my first real kiss. We hugged and kissed all the way home. Less than a week later, I took her to a movie, and we sat in the back row with two other couples, probably both scared to death and nervous as goldfish in a blender. We started going out for evenings that were becoming more and more colorful. Within an hour of the movie starting, I was barely in control of myself anymore. If I had a little more confidence or a little more knowledge, who knows what could have happened. As usual, I went pretty far, maybe even too far, and was scared to death afterward. She was my first girlfriend. I hadn't called her in days and even avoided her at school, not knowing what to say. In short, I was a complete non-entity. Everyone thought we should be together. She was the pretty cheerleading captain, and I was the big jock who played all the sports while excelling in school. She was voted most popular. I was most successful. However, in this case, it turned out that she was most uninspiring, and I was most inept. After waiting a few days, amazingly patient in retrospect, she instructed her best friend Sherry, Tommy's sister, to inform me that she didn't think we should date. The next thing I knew, she was already dating some weirdo guy and dated him for the rest of the school year. I transferred to another school at the end of that year, and the next year, until I moved to Santiago, we saw each other only occasionally. In the backyard, Catherine and I were walking alone, and we finally had a few minutes alone. You know, Kat, I don't think I ever apologized for being such an idiot after our first date. I'm really sorry. She was silent for a while. She had a sad look in her eyes. You know, I waited for you by the phone night after night, crying myself to sleep. I saw you dodging me at school, and it broke my heart. I was young and stupid. I had never done anything with a girl before, and I couldn't even believe I was with the best girl in school. After everything I did, God, I was so embarrassed I was out of line and I didn't know what to say. She took a seat under the big tree in the backyard, and I sat down next to her on the round bench around it. You could say something to Jack or Tommy and have them tell me. At least let me know you liked me, or that you had fun. At least something. She looked on the verge of tears, even 3 years later, and I felt even worse. I know. I used to berate myself about it all the time. I was so mad at myself and jealous when you were dating Ricky. I admitted. He was good to me when I needed it. But it seemed so strange. He was a nobody. The only noteworthy thing he did was date you. I told her. He lived 2 houses down. We grew up together, and when my heart was broken, he picked up the pieces. He realized something was wrong and helped me feel so much better, she confessed. There was a brief period of silence. It allowed me to think better of Ricky, who wasn't just lucky or opportunistic. You know, that was one of the most memorable moments of my life. I had no idea what I was supposed to do or what I could do, but I kept looking down the row at Dennis and Suzanne and thinking that I should be able to do this too. I was in 7th heaven. It was so great with you, I told her, reaching out and taking her hand in mine. Her palm was damp. You're telling me, you were a big 9th grader with a learner's permit and a motorcycle, big man on campus, the guy every girl wanted to be with, and you were with me. I had no idea what we should or shouldn't do on a date. I was hoping you knew. We laughed about it, remembering the intensity of those feelings. If I had the chance to do it all over again, I'd set up a tent on your doorstep and declare my undying love as soon as you walked out the door, I told her half-heartedly. As I recall, you confessed your love to me that night, just before that moment. She said it with a sly grin. I'm sure I blushed profusely. I can't apologize, but I'm really sorry. I'm sorry now, and I'm sorry then. I fantasized about you for years after that, thinking about what could have been if I hadn't been such a jerk. You have no idea how many fantasies I had about you back then. If only you had let me know. Ricky was my first. It could have been you. If I had half a chance, it would have been you. She moved closer and spoke more softly. And this is my punishment. The realization of how badly I screwed up. Seeing you here, as beautiful as you were in my dreams, and knowing that I ruined any chance I had of being with you. I put my hand on the back of her head, stroking her hair. I wouldn't say you blew all your chances, but you sure blew this one. We looked into each other's eyes, remembering strong, painful feelings. I wanted to kiss her now, as I had then, with a deep, burning need, and leaning forward the last 2 inches, I did. She gave in to her feelings. We stood like that for a few minutes, and then we went our separate ways. Her eyes glistened. I have a boyfriend, she admitted. I nodded understandingly. If I hadn't, I reached forward, pressing my index finger to her lips. I know. I missed my chance. It's my failure. We just sat side by side for a minute in silence. You know, she said softly, what you did to me that night was part of the problem. I know. I'm sorry if I stepped out of line, I said, even now embarrassed by my fretfulness. No, it's nothing bad. What you did to me, what you made me feel, it took over a year before another guy could do the same thing, she said. So that makes 2 of us. I don't know if you knew, but I had that feeling too, and you didn't even touch me. I snuck outside and threw my pants away before my mom found them and asked uncomfortable questions. I told her, laughing. She threw me a strange look and then slid around the tree, putting its 3-foot-wide trunk between us and the house. She held out her hand to me, and I followed, of course. May I mean, do you mind? She seemed at a loss for words. What? Just ask. I certainly owe you a debt of gratitude, I told her. She didn't bother to ask, she just sprang into action. I've always wondered, but I've never had the chance to find out. That night you found out almost everything about me, but I didn't, she continued. I knew it, you bastard. Look at that. I didn't need to look. I knew it perfectly well, that's all. It was too much for me, she chuckled. If I wasn't tied up, I'd make you pay compensation, she told me. Let's consider it a deferred payment. If it doesn't work out, maybe we'll try again. Rochester isn't that far from Amherst. I didn't yet know what the future held for us, but that's another story. We walked to the house hand in hand, laughing at the recklessness of youth, coming from the smarts of 18 and 19. Soon she, like us, had to leave, and I kissed her goodbye at the door. As soon as the door closed, there was an exclamation from behind me. I turned to Tommy, who said, Now I've seen everything. Amen to that, Jack said. What? I asked. After the way you treated her after our first date, I was sure you were on her shit list for life, explained Jack. Absolutely. Tommy entered the conversation. Sherry said Catherine has been fantasizing about you for years. I was a fool. I did some things I'd never done before and I was so embarrassed I didn't know how to even look her in the eye. So, I blew it and avoided her. I just apologized, and we worked things out. I think she realizes that I wasn't trying to be mean. I was just young and stupid. I didn't realize what I was doing and regretted it for years. I told them, Gee, I always wondered how you could turn her down when she was so available to you. You really screwed up, didn't you? Remarked Tommy. Yeah, not the first time, and I'm sure it won't be the last. But it looks like we've buried the hatchet, I replied. I'm just amazed the axe isn't stuck in your back, added Jack. Sometime after that, we left. We had one last visit to make. Terry Branson was passing through town and wanted to see us if she could. She was coming for one day, and none of us wanted to miss the chance. The summer before 10th grade, I practically lived at Terry's house. It was soccer time, and we practiced twice a day. Morning practice, then recess, so we wouldn't be stuck in the midday Florida summer sun all day. After the break, the afternoon workout would begin. Terry went to our high school, and I never really knew her until that summer. She lived just a block away from Mike's, and one day we ran into her while washing the family car. We struck up a conversation, and the rest is history. That summer, I spent all my soccer vacations at her house. Mike didn't play soccer, but I would pick him up on the way there and we would spend time together. She had a pool table and a separate rec room with an arcade machine. Her mother always brought us snacks and drinks. Terry wasn't popular and she was the new kid in school. But in just a few months, she went from a tomboy to a stunningly beautiful teenager. She lost a little weight, changed her glasses for contact lenses, got her braces off, and suddenly this beautiful girl was among us, and no one but us knew about her. She was our secret. Tommy went to a different school than Mike and I, but we still spent most of our summers together, and we had to let him in on our secret. The closest thing to something happening was a bizarre game of spin the bottle under the pool table. Mike, Tommy, me, and Terry. Just an excuse for us to take turns kissing her. At the end of the summer, her dad was being reassigned again. I told her I was going to throw a birthday party and that we were going to play spin the wheel. I was hoping she would be there, but now she was leaving. We were all upset. Tommy suggested we play now since she couldn't make it, so we did. It was weird, but great. 2 weeks later, she was gone. We met Terry at the mall. We couldn't miss her. She was the center of attention. And still gorgeous. We ran up to her and hugged her from all sides. I can only stay for 20 minutes, she told us, pouting. Shit, was all I could say. The three of us looked around the mall, watching all the changes. It had become brand new in the year we'd been together. We grabbed a few drinks and went outside. Our time was almost up, and we barely had time to look back. Terry, I have a confession, I told her. I know we acted like friends, but I was crazy about you. That summer I went home every night and dreamed about you. Hell, we all did it, admitted Tommy. We were such idiots, she said. She reached for my collar and pulled me to her to kiss me. Terry was about 5'5", so I was at least a foot taller than her. Leaning in, I let her kiss me, and she readily returned the kiss. Finally, she let go of me. I'm so confused. One day I liked you, and the next day I liked you, she said, nodding toward the group. And then you. I kept wondering who was going to be my first real boyfriend. I just knew it would be one of you, and then it was over. She looked up at me. I still dream about you sometimes. All we could do was laugh and say we'd get together sometime. She was now living in Phoenix, graduating from high school, and looking like she was going to Stanford. It would be a challenge to ever get that kind of interaction, but it didn't seem like it would be worth the effort. Then her parents drove up. We said hello to her mom, who was my secret fantasy at the time, and then with one last hug, said goodbye to Terry. It was getting late, so we drove Mike to his house and drove in mostly silence. I imagine we were all immersed in thinking about the vagaries of fate and what might have been. For me, it was thoughts of Catherine and Terry, two incredible opportunities that any teenager would kill himself for, and I let slip through my fingers. We dropped Mike off, but didn't go inside. We were running late and knew that if we went inside, we wouldn't get out right away. It was a 5-minute drive from Mike's to Tommy's, but we drove past Terry's old house, just for nostalgia's sake. We were late for Tommy's. Dinner was supposed to be at 6 p.m., and somehow we had burned through the day. It was already 5:45 p.m. when we walked in the door, and we both wanted to get cleaned up before dinner. The kids' rooms had 2 separate bathrooms, one at the end of the hallway and one in Greg's room. So I undressed and went into the shower. I didn't expect the bathroom to be full. Sherry was in it, applying the last of her makeup. Fortunately, or unfortunately, she was dressed. When I walked in, she squealed, came over and hugged me tightly. I can't believe you're here. You look great, she said, stepping back and giving me a look. Wow, Sherry, you look great, was all I could say. She'd always been beautiful. But the difference between the 15-year-old Sherry and this one was like night and day. The older Sherry was a beautiful young woman. Thank you, she said. I'll be leaving now, and you can settle down here. I'm dying to talk to you. I'll be here all night, I joked, retreating to the room I was using. I sat on the bed and waited, and after a minute or so, she poked her head in and said, It's all yours. She left the door open and came out the other side of the bathroom. So that was one change I hadn't noticed. This used to be Greg's bathroom, but someone had since removed the linen closet, and the old closet door now opened into Sherry's room. In hindsight, it should have been obvious. When Greg was gone, there was a lot of stuff in the bathroom, albeit very neat. If I opened any closet or drawer, I would see all the makeup and girly stuff. I used Sherry's bathroom. I quickly cleaned myself up and got dressed. I was in a bit of a hurry, wanting to still wrap a couple of small gifts for the hosts. I had bought some cassette tapes for my sister as a Christmas present, and decided to give Tommy one of them. I also had a framed picture for my mom, so I decided to make the frame a family gift. It was simple, handmade from an apple tree. Taking paper, tape, and scissors, I was ready to join the others in a few minutes. My first Christmas away from home, which began with potential disappointment, actually turned out to be quite wonderful. The family welcomed me and treated me like family. Dinner was delicious. Christmas ham with a full array of side dishes. After dinner, we chatted, drank too much eggnog, and told stories of the last few years. I sat next to Cherie whenever I could, next to her at the dinner table, next to her on the couch as we drank eggnog. I tried to engage her in quiet conversation, but the setting wasn't conducive to that, and eventually I gave up. I enjoyed just being around her. Tommy's stepfather Dave insisted I call Santiago, even though I knew the price would be prohibitive, so I did. I gave my family my Christmas wishes, told them how much I missed them, and looked forward to seeing them in a couple days. Everyone in the room took a minute to say hello and share congratulations. I had to spend a few minutes trying to get my mom to stop crying at the far end of the room before we could finally talk on the phone. The kids went to bed relatively early, so traditionally we all opened one gift each the night before. I gave Tommy his gift, and his mom opened the family gift, and everyone was pleased. In turn, they bought me a gift, which I opened. It was 2 books for the trip, and also a card for me. Inside was $50. I was in complete shock. Dear Steve, your short visit was a wonderful Christmas present for all of us. Thank you so much for choosing to spend this Christmas with us. Here's some crazy money for the trip home. We all love you, Dave, June, Robert, Sherry, John, and Jean. I was deeply touched by the gesture. I walked over and gave Tommy's mom a big hug, thanking her for the card and the books. The kids jumped up with their gifts, and I got 2 new drawings from my dorm room, as well as some mysterious invention from John that was supposed to be a spy tool to keep people from sneaking into my room. I thanked them warmly, and soon they went to bed. Dave, Tommy, and I discussed the logistics of my morning bus ride to Charleston. It was leaving at 7:30 a.m., but it was only a 15-minute drive, so we expected to start at 7 a.m. We relaxed by the fire, thinking about the poor souls who had to drive that bus all day for Christmas. In the corner stood a guitar that belonged to Greg. I was surprised he hadn't brought it with him. I went over and picked it up, and finding it completely out of tune, tuned it. "Play something Christmassy," Tommy's mom asked, and I played a couple tunes. I'm not a bad guitarist. I studied guitar at the Eastman School of Music, as it was convenient, and ROTC fit the bill and have improved quite a bit since our first band. I got rave reviews from my small audience and took requests for a while before we broke up. The parents still had some work to do for the kids, and Tommy and I wanted to get to bed early to catch the 7:30 bus. More hugs and kisses, a firm handshake from Dave, and I retired to my room to finish packing. I got ready for bed, changed into boxers and a t-shirt, laid out my clothes for the morning, and finished packing. I wanted to do one more thing before I went to bed, so I went back to the bathroom and knocked on the opposite door to Cherie's room. I heard a muffled "come in" or something like that, and when I opened the door, I found Cherie sitting up in bed, brushing her long blonde hair. She was wearing an almost transparent pale green nightie that took my breath away. "Hi." I felt incredibly awkward, like I was 16 again. She looked at me, raising an eyebrow, perplexed. "I had a present for you, but I felt silly handing it over there on the street. I hope you don't mind that I waited until now." I held out a small leather pouch to her. She took it, setting the brush aside, and opened it, pulling out a small cross. She held out the cord and looked at me in surprise. "But that's your mountain cross. You always wear it," she said, looking at me with a strange look that I couldn't understand. "I found the cross while mountaineering a few years ago. I had a small accident. During a mountain hike, I fell into a glacier-fed stream while gathering firewood during a storm. I nearly froze to death before I made it to the cabin. Literally, I thought I was going to die. I was hiking the last 20 feet to the building in a daze when a friend returning from the bathroom came upon me and pulled me inside to keep me warm. The next morning, I found a small ivory cross on a rotted leather cord. almost at the very spot where I'd climbed out of the creek, and I'd worn it for several years since. Sherry knew the story. I told it all to her one night when I was giving her driving lessons. I don't know what prompted me to give it to her, but I got the urge, and I've always been a pretty impulsive person. I just want you to have it, I explained. She patted the bed beside her to make me sit up, then handed me the cross to put around her neck and turned her back to me. I ran my hands over my head, letting the cross dangle, and she reached back and flipped her hair back so I could fasten the necklace on her. When I finished, she turned to me and, running her fingers over the cross, thanked me. I got a strange phone call today with a strange offer. She told me. How weird is that? I asked. I got a call from Catherine. We hadn't spoken in probably over a year, but she called me out of the blue and we talked about nothing but you for over an hour. She said it with a teasing smile. I could feel my face blazing with a blush. We were silent for a while. Then she spoke softly, not looking at me, just lowering her gaze to her hands. Remember the party where you asked me to skate 5 times? How could it be? My hand got so sweaty I felt awkward holding yours, but I didn't know how to wipe it off, and I wasn't a good enough skater to make a real dance out of it. I laughed. I thought you liked me and were going to ask me out, but you never did? Why? She asked. The memory was awkward, and I thought for a moment before admitting it. I was riding with Catherine at the beginning of the evening, and she asked me who I liked. I said I'd answer by the end of the evening. Later, when I was trying to work up the courage to ride with you again and ask you to sit next to me on the bus ride to Pensacola, Jack found me and said I'd better ask Catherine to ride. She was waiting for me to tell her something. Well, I did ask her to ride, and she reminded me of our previous conversation. I confessed that I really liked 2 people, you and her. Then she asked if I would mind if she monopolized me for a while. I agreed. Next thing you know, 1 bus ride out of town, 1 back row at the movies, and I blew it. She listened without showing much surprise. But why didn't you ever try anything after that? God, how could I? You knew about everything that had happened. Don't you remember how I used to drop in on you when Net was staying here for the night? Every time I passed you, you seemed to laugh at me. And when you passed me in the hallway and whispered, "Ooh, I love you," teasing me with what I said to Catherine before completely blowing her off, I was just devastated. Not only did I ruin my only chance, but I ruined you as well. Sherry blushed with embarrassment. I really didn't know what was going on. Catherine just told me to come up to you and tell you that. I'm really sorry. Not as sorry as I was. I told her. You should have known how much I liked you. I always tried to be there for you and do things with you. I didn't know how much of it was just Tommy's sister or what. I kept waiting for you to try to do something, anything, but you never did. She looked at me intently, almost with anguish. I was 16 again. I was still ashamed of my ineptitude with women. I'd screwed up with Catherine. I'd screwed up with Terry. And I'd screwed up with Sherry. Since then, I'd had more than enough success with the young women I knew, but suddenly it was like I was clumsy and scared again. Sherry looked at me for a long moment, then sighed and turned away, picking up her brush and going back to brushing her hair. Some things will never change, I guess, she murmured, ignoring me. I started to get up to go to my room, knowing this wasn't the time or place to try and start something with Sherry, but I just couldn't leave it at that. I reached out and took the brush from her, which she slowly let go of. I then took her by the shoulders and turned her towards me so she could brush her hair. I was quiet for a moment, brushing her hair before I spoke. For at least a year after I left here, I dreamed about you constantly. You were the girl from my fantasies. We corresponded so well for a while, and I kept all your letters, rereading them over and over again, searching for hidden meanings in the words and wondering if I would ever get the chance to be with you. I still have those letters, I confessed. A few long seconds later, Sherry reached into the bottom drawer of the dresser next to the bed and opened it. She reached under her sweater and pulled out a stack of letters bound together with a rubber band. I recognized my letter. She turned to look at me, and her eyes sparkled. I dropped the brush, leaned over, and kissed her nervously, hoping she wouldn't kick me noisily out of her room. Instead, she turned around and returned my kiss. When we parted, we just stared at each other. Suddenly, I couldn't help but giggle. What? she asked, almost crossing her arms. Remember when you thought you were going to get pregnant from a French kiss? I remembered. She blushed again. I can't believe you still remember that, you monster. How did you even know about it? Catherine told me about it during the bus ride. I think she was trying to make you seem naive to reinforce her power over me. I told her. That fool, she always denied it, but I couldn't think of anyone else who knew. We laughed a little and gradually sank back into kissing. In the next break between our kisses, Sherry asked me the question again. Tommy said you did it with Angela. Was she your first? No, I never did it with her, and Colleen was my first. I admitted. Colin? From the yearbook? Yes, but only a year later. She went to Mosley with me and we met at a party. It was weird, but nothing much came of it. 3 weeks later, I went to Chile. I told her. She only shook her head. Since it's time for real confessions, who was your first? I asked, teasingly. Rich? Mike? Oh God, no. She laughed. Then who? She never answered, only blushed brightly. Come on. Everything's fair game. I told you so. I persuaded her relentlessly. She mumbled something I couldn't make out. I can't hear you. Who was that? I teased again. She raised her head, almost fiercely. No one, okay? Burned in embarrassment. Chapter 2. I was stunned, and the silence that ensued seemed endless. Are you kidding me? I finally said, hardly believing it. Her reply sounded so quiet, I almost missed it. I once thought you'd be my first. This time when we kissed, I threw caution to the wind. Steve? Yes? Close the door and turn off the lights, then turn off the bathroom light, she said softly. I saw that she had turned off the light in her room. She was lying in bed, carefully pulling back the covers, waiting for me. She was still in her nightgown. I stood next to the bed and obliged. She was lying on her side, leaning on her elbow. In the dim light, she was devastatingly beautiful. I leaned toward her and kissed her. In that kiss, I lost my soul. I lost all sense of time and presence. Our kiss finally broke, and from an inch away, we looked into each other's eyes. I was overcome with desire. Wait. Then she did something, and I was beyond thrilled. It had finally gotten to me. I've had many women, and several of them claimed to have had no one. But not one of them had anything that this amazing girl had. I didn't know what to do. I was at a complete loss. I saw a wet path that glistened from the corner of my eye to my ear. Are you okay? I asked. Wonderful, she said quietly. I leaned over and whispered in her ear. I've always liked you. You knew that. I knew it. But I was afraid. I was afraid of your brother's taunts. Afraid of being exposed for not knowing anything about what to do with a girl, afraid of ruining our friendship, afraid you'd tell all the other girls, and I'd be a laughingstock, afraid of a lot of stupid things. I was an idiot. You weren't afraid of Catherine, she replied quietly. She was the initiator of it all. She pushed through, asked to monopolize me, held my hand. I probably would never have decided to take that step. If I could have made a difference, it would have been that skating party. I should have saved that last moonlit skate for you and asked you out. I should have told Catherine that you were the only girl I was interested in. Who knows how things would have turned out? Besides, it wasn't that important. If it didn't work out, fine. But if I messed up my relationship with you, it would have ruined all my dreams. I had to cut a little moment here because of YouTube, but don't be sad because all the full stories are on our Patreon. And there's a 7-day trial subscription, and it's totally free. As my heart hammered in my chest, and my breathing quickened, she let out a small, happy laugh. Then she hugged me tightly. She climbed over me and scrambled into the bathroom, waddling clumsily. I heard her tinkle and return to the bed. Then she climbed into bed, put her head on my shoulder, and started talking. She recalled almost every time we were alone together, all of our adventures, the summer we learned to play tennis together, and what she thought might happen. We laughed a little at my ineptitude and her caution. Do you think we can try again? She asked hesitantly. I really want to, but I'm afraid I might hurt you. I laughed my stupid, insecure laugh. So do it, she teased. I whispered to her, "Come up on your elbows." She looked at me strangely, but agreed, lifting her head a few inches off the pillow. "You really seem to like me," she laughed. Then she started asking me about my afternoon encounter with Catherine. "What did she say to you?" I asked, a little nervously. "No, you're going to tell me what happened." "I don't trust her," she insisted. I told her the whole story, including the ending, with all the short but telling details. "I knew it," she laughed. "She said you tried and forced her, but she turned you down." "If that's the way she wants to tell it, I don't mind. I'm in her debt. Let it be as she wants it to be," I said. "When you went to the movies, what really happened there?" she asked, still in her thoughts. I wasn't sure what she was into, but in the end I told her the whole scene, everything I'd done, everything I'd allowed myself to do. At the end, I waited for a decision. "She's such a liar. She said different things altogether. And the fact that she stopped you." "Hardly." I laughed. Sherry was deep in thought. My hands stroked her back, the material of her nightgown, soft and silky against my fingertips. "I think there's only one thing she did with you that we didn't," Sherry began, and then did something. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," I told her. "Right. And now I suppose you're going to confess your love for me, just like Catherine did." She said it with a note of bitterness I didn't understand. The difference is that back then it was the hormones of a 16-year-old teenager. "But I've been in love with you for 3 years, and you know it," I said. And it wasn't until I said those words that I realized how true it was. Sherry didn't answer. "Tell me again." I couldn't hold back any longer, nor did I want to. "I love you, Sherry. I've loved you for as long as I've known you." I said it, knowing I was leaving in a few hours, not knowing when I would see her again. "I love you, Steve," she said, and I felt her tears roll down my face. I looked up to see the sky brightening with the coming dawn and thought, "Here's another one you hooked on Catherine." I released myself from her embrace and kissed her. "I've got to go. Tommy will be looking for me any minute." Somehow we spent the whole night reminiscing, sharing, and having a great time. It was so hard, but I pulled out of her embrace, tucked her into bed, and kissed her goodnight. "Sleep for a couple hours. I can sleep on the bus," I told her. She was still wearing the cross I had given her. She was now holding it in her hands. "Thank you for the Christmas present," she said with a small, sad smile. I kissed her again and retreated to the bathroom for a quick shower and shave. When I got back to my room, I got dressed and found a gift waiting for me on my suitcase. An 8x10 photo of Cherie, as beautiful as I'd ever seen her, with a small inscription on the back. "Merry Christmas. Don't forget about me. Love, Sherry." I had just finished cleaning it up when Tommy knocked on my door and dragged me to breakfast and then to the bus. The rest of the trip went without incident. I made it home, picked up some gifts in Panama, saw old friends, and made it back to college in one piece. But I will always remember that first Christmas away from home and the best Christmas present I ever received. Not my first construction kit or the 114-piece Lincoln log tube. Not my first really cool bike, a purple spider bike with a banana seat, big handlebars, and a 3-speed shifter on the handlebars. Not my first electric guitar, a Fender, and an amp that I think my parents were a little hesitant about. No, Sherry's gift was the nicest gift I've ever received and may yet receive at Christmas. Just a thank you doesn't seem to be enough. So we have come to the end of this incredible story, full of passion, doubt, and deep feelings. A story about 2 young hearts who found each other in the labyrinths of youth and experienced a storm of emotions. The story about Stesha and Sherry is a story about ourselves, about our fears, our desires, our mistakes, and our victories. We were all once young, inexperienced, afraid of judgment, and wanted to be loved. Steve became a mirror for us, reflecting our own doubts and insecurities. Sherry is a symbol of purity, sincerity, and strength. She was able to forgive, understand, and give a chance for a new beginning. Her image is an ideal of femininity that inspires and makes you believe in the best. Their story is not just a romantic fairy tale. This is a deep dive into the psychology of relationships, where every step of the characters reveals new facets of the human soul. The fear of losing friendship, the desire to live up to expectations, the struggle with one's own complexes. All this is familiar to each of us. The ending of the story leaves us with a feeling of hope and faith in love. Yes, the path to happiness is not always easy, but sincerity and openness can overcome any obstacles. I hope this story will inspire you to be open, to overcome your own fears, and to find true love. And remember that this is only part of an amazing story. The full version with an even deeper immersion into the world of heroes awaits you on our Patreon. There you will find answers to all your questions and plunge into the atmosphere of this story even deeper. Thank you for being with us. See you again. Subscribe to our channel, like, and share your impressions in the comments.